Yeah. Okay. I want to call the subcommittee on the Tactical Air and Land Forces subcommittee to order. I'd like to welcome our witnesses today. Thank you so much for joining us. And this is our first subcommittee hearing of the 118th Congress. I want to thank my colleagues for being here. I want to thank the ranking member, Don. Thank you so much for all that you have done up to now, all your leadership on the on the subcommittee, everything that you'll do also going forward. So it's great to be here with my new ranking member colleague and Don Norcross and my true friend Joe Courtney, who was a colleague there on CPower, also a colleague here on TAL. So great opportunity. So we're here today, as we know, to review the 2024 budget request for the Department of Defense's fixed-wing tactical and training aircraft programs. I, again, thank our witnesses for testifying today, and I welcome both new and returning members, as I've said, to our TAL subcommittee. Hopefully, we'll have a few members on our side of the aisle actually show up, so we'll give the attendance award today to Don and his colleagues. So I look forward to being able to lead the subcommittee. Really look forward to serving with Don in his capacity. And we have a critically important role here as we review over $133 billion of programs in our jurisdiction, the largest of any of the hardware subcommittees. And as I've stated many times in the past, the National Defense Strategy is clear in its focus on China as our nation's pacing threat. During my previous tenure as ranking member on the CPower Projection Forces Subcommittee, we oversaw critical capabilities of the long-range strike and long-range logistics portfolios. They are essential components of executing Indo-PACOM's military strategy and enabling operational successes of the joint force competing against the tyranny of distance in response to an ever-increasing Chinese aggression. Additionally, I truly believe that these long-range capabilities I just described are even more essential as they augment and support the tactical fighter fleet. However, I am, though, worried about the Department's current direction regarding the composition of our United States military's tactical Air Force structure and how our fighters are going to function in that realm and what the required capabilities will be within that effort. I'm concerned that our existing force structure is optimized for a counterinsurgency fight and is not prepared to address the challenges posed by an expected threat in the Indo-PACOM area. As I review the plans for each service, two threads are particularly concerning. First, our fighter force structure continues decreasing. And second, we are not able to deliver replacement aircraft at affordable prices to achieve similar quantities going forward. Meanwhile, our adversaries continue outpacing us, building and fielding their own lethal fighter aircraft capability and capacity. I find we also continue to ask ourselves whether or not this administration and the Department of Defense strives to maintain the U.S. as the enduring global power, or where they continue down the evident glide slope of reducing us to a regional power in that status. For the Air Force, their fiscal 2023 through fiscal 2028 plan includes divesting 801 fighter aircraft, but only buying back 345 new F-35A and F-15EX aircraft. The F-15EX program of record is not fully funded. The 200 planned next-generation air dominance manned fighters are many years away from fielding and will cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars per aircraft. The Air Force has yet to figure out how they will buy 1,763 F-35A aircraft after acknowledging their major operating cost assumption of $4.1 million per aircraft per year is unachievable. The Air Force in this budget canceled the electronic warfare upgrade for the fleet of the existing F-16s, which now puts into question the viability and survivability of that aircraft fleet in the future, and which could be construed as an intentional precursor to justifying divestment of a significant amount of that capable fleet at a later date. And while the Air Force's new collaborative combat aircraft concept may hold promise and affordability in making up for fighter capacity shortfalls, there's still a long road ahead where we have to integrate autonomous capability seamlessly amongst manned platforms, and especially when the Air Force still can't get their fourth and fifth generation manned fighter aircraft to reliably share tactically relevant data during combat air operations. Meanwhile, the Navy has a strike fighter shortfall. This year, it amounts to 17 aircraft, and that number grows in the future until 2030. The Navy has yet to sign a contract for 20 aircraft appropriated over the past 2 years and still has not achieved their planned purchase rate of 24 F-35C aircraft per year. They still have not demonstrated they can affordably modify legacy Block 2 Super Hornets into Block 3 capable aircraft. They've reduced the F-35C squadron force presentation and carrier air wings from 2 squadrons of 10 aircraft to 1 squadron of 16 aircraft, and has similar challenges as the Air Force in affordably trying to field their version of the manned next-generation air dominance aircraft. And I would be remiss if I didn't also mention the Marine Corps. While I support the overall contours of the Commandant's Force Design 2030 concept regarding land forces, I currently also have concerns with the plans regarding aviation force structure. I'd like to understand why the Marine Corps plans to remove 54 combat-coded F-35B and C aircraft in attrition reserve status for a total of 117 attrition reserve aircraft, or 28% of their fleet, but still maintains an overall program of record of 420 F-35 aircraft, especially when F-35B and C fully mission-capable rates have averaged over the past years at only 27% and 21.5%, respectively. Finally, I want to discuss the F-35 program, given its current plan to compromise a significant portion of our future tactical air fleet around the world, presuming we're still able to afford all 2,456 aircraft for the U.S. and approximately 1,000 aircraft for partners and foreign customers. Up front, I want to unequivocally state that the F-35 will be the most advanced tactical aircraft the United States has ever built. Although multiple challenges exist across various aspects of the F-35 enterprise, I want to highlight 2 near-term issues. F-35 is currently planned to achieve full operational capability status after the full TR-3 and Block 4 capabilities of the aircraft are fielded in 2028, 27 years after the program began. That is by any measure unacceptable, and the program has to do better. We currently understand that TR-3 is approximately $700 million over budget, and the last update we received from the program office about delivering TR-3 capability is April 2024 of next year, which puts it a year late to the previous plan. We have to make sure that we do better because the original projected date of delivery was April of 2023. We've learned the late TR-3 delivery is now impacting existing fighter squadrons, divesting of their legacy fighter aircraft, but not receiving the planned 35A replacements in time, which would leave the fighter squadrons and highly trained personnel without any significant aircraft for significant periods of time. To quote a senior Air Force official I've met with on the topic, they've said, "We currently are paying for a great capability, but we're currently only getting a good capability fielded." The second issue is F-35 propulsion and the thermal management system modernization. As I continue gathering facts and data about the existing program and review the budget proposal of the department to pursue a sole source industry solution known as the Engine Core Upgrade, or ECU, I'd like to understand more from our witnesses about the avionics cooling requirements that have been set by the services. In addition to understanding the technical risk, the schedule, and system integration assessments the program office performed related to major subsystems for power and fuel thermal management and electrical generation that they have made in their proposal. Again, I want to thank the witnesses today for appearing before us, and now yield to our ranking member from the great state of New Jersey, Mr. Don Norcross.
Thank you, Chairman, and congratulations. It's great to have you here. You're surrounded by your ex-chairman, who's your good friend, and apparently I'm only the friend, so I have to work on that.
Good friend also.
Good friends. But it's great to be here and look forward to continuing to work with you, having served under you on CPOW for a number of years. And to all our witnesses here today, thank you very much. As we come out of this pandemic, we are still experiencing as been said before, the hangover of a supply chain that is challenged, which goes along with much of the workforce, trying to get them back up. But I think it's important to remember and to thank those who continue to work during the pandemic. You cannot build these jets from home. You cannot build them on Zoom. So to all the men and women who toiled every day during the pandemic, very much appreciated, along with all our service men and women. In reviewing the Air Force and Navy requests this year for tactical aircraft, there's clearly great justification, as ever, for this subcommittee's continued detailed oversight of these large, complex, and expensive programs. This hearing is one of the most important that we do each year, and understandably, we often focus on the issues related to costs, performance, schedule, and management of these. However, with this budget request, we need to also get answers from our witnesses about what they are assessing and managing of the strategic risk associated with our tactical aviation force structure. An example is the Air Force will produce 72 aircraft in year 24, but plans to retire 131, and Chairman has already talked about that. A net loss of 59 tactical fighter aircraft. Moreover, looking at 2028, they plan to procure 288 aircraft and retire 685. Although these numbers don't tell the entire game, they are certainly a clue as some of the challenges we're going to face. We should all want reassurances that we are not retiring too much capability too soon, especially given the continued delays with the F-35, TR-3 Block 4, and the NGAD system that are not going to be fielded for a number of years. We appreciate the Air Force witnesses addressing their strategy for management of this risk with tactical aviation, capability, and capacity. The Navy and Marine Corps' force structure analysis and plans are just as challenging, and a coherent message at times is elusive. 3 years ago, Navy strike fighter shortfall would last till 2030. 2 years ago, Navy told us that the strike fighter shortfall would be resolved to zero in 2025. And we've been briefed that the striker shortfall will not be resolved to 31. Related, Marine Corps plan reduces the number of tactical fighter aircraft in operational squadrons, and all this makes oversight of the Navy Marine Corps management risk more difficult, especially concerning the projections drastically change from year to year. Understanding that COVID did have a play in here, but certainly doesn't make up for all of it. Finally, focusing on the F-35 program, the most expensive program in our nation's history. Although this program has tremendous accomplishment, it also suffers from enduring delays, cost overruns, and management decisions that are particularly recent engine malfunctions that had temporarily halted the deliveries. The joint simulation environment delay is delaying IOT&E full rate production decision. We heard that. And also, we've yet to field the need for the TR Block 4 capabilities and certainly we'd like to hear Mr. Hunter lay out the Air Force's rationale for its recent decision to go with the engine core upgrade to the 135 engine instead of the alternative. It's especially helpful to have the GAO here today, as they have been in past years, as Congress with an independent assessment of this key program, including strong, actionable recommendations for how we can improve. Bottom line is that with many difficult and challenging acquisition sustainment objectives occurring this decade, we need to understand what adjustments the program's leadership is undertaking to achieve realistic schedules, reliable cost estimates that deliver an affordable and full capability that many nations are relying upon to support their national security requirement. Mr. Chairman, as this is our first hearing, I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce our member who is left already, as I just looked down. So Pat Ryan from New York's 18th District and Jeff Jackson from North Carolina, 14th, both of them great experience, have served our nation well, and we look forward to their participation in the future. You can't make this up. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Well, thank you to my good friend, Mr. Norcross. Don, thanks so much, and believe me, I know how it is with members going in and out. So we're now going to go to our witnesses. We have before us testifying today the Honorable Andrew Hunter, Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, Lieutenant General Richard Moore, Deputy Chief of Staff for Air Force Plans and Programs, Mr. Jay Stephanie, Acting Assistant Secretary of Navy for Research Development and Senior Acquisition Executive for the F-35 program. Rear Admiral Louis L., Director of Navy's Air Warfare Division, Lieutenant General Mike Cederholm, Deputy Commandant of Marine Corps Aviation, Lieutenant General Michael Schmidt, F-35 Program Executive Officer, and Mr. John Ludwigson, Director of the Contracting and National Security Acquisition Team for the Government Accountability Office. Mr. Hunter, we'll start with you.
All right. Well, thank you, Chairman Whitman and Ranking Member Norcross. It's a pleasure to be back.
Thank you.
And all the members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to testify. Lieutenant General Moore and I are very pleased to be here to provide testimony on the Air Force's fiscal year 2024 budget request for fixed-wing tactical and training aircraft. And I will hit the highlights because it's a big panel in my open testimony. We look forward to responding to your detailed questions as you desire. The Air Force's fiscal year 24 budget request reflects our commitment to developing a threat-informed future Air Force equipped to win a high-end fight. Last year, Secretary Kendall and General Brown outlined the 7 operational imperatives we must meet to succeed. The operational imperatives were the combined work of the entire Air and Space Force teams, combining the best insights of our operators, operational analysis, and the acquisition enterprise. As a result of this analysis and work, we have over $25 billion requested in fiscal year 24 for operational imperative-related investments. Our fiscal year 24 request balances this investment in critically needed new capability with recapitalization and modernization of our existing platforms. I'll highlight just a few of the key investments in my opening remarks. I do want to emphasize that the F-35 is the cornerstone of our future fighter fleet, and we have fielded nearly 400 F-35As to date. In the near term, we are very focused and must focus on fielding the F-35 Block 4 capability that we need to address advanced threats. While crewed fighters will remain the core of the U.S. Air Force combat power, a centerpiece of our FY24 budget request is the uncrewed collaborative combat aircraft, which will provide new combat capabilities and cost-effective capacity to the fighter force. CCA is the single largest operational imperative investment, with over $6 billion requested across the FYDP. In fiscal year 24, we're investing hundreds of millions to rapidly begin development of the first CCA platform and to leverage our extensive existing work on autonomy to underpin CCA. We're establishing an operational experimentation unit to work with existing platforms and capable partner nations to prove out the concept of operations for CCA. Also, as we modernize the bulk of our F-22 fleet, we are transitioning from F-22 to NGAD. Funds garnered by divesting F-22 Block 20s are going to be reinvested or are being reinvested in NGAD development across the FYDP, and the transition timeline is dependent on our progress of achieving the success and development of NGAD. The Air Force is ensuring cost control on NGAD by driving continuous competition for air vehicles, mission systems, software, and by mandating the use of a government-owned reference architecture. We're also changing the way we execute highly complex acquisition programs by taking a hands-on approach to digital engineering that accelerates prototyping, drives efficiencies in manufacturing, and reduces costs in operations sustainment. Our FY24 request funds aircraft design, development, test, and the integration of advanced mission systems, as well as cooperative development of the Agile Mission Suite. Perhaps the most essential element of our fiscal year 24 request is our efforts to develop effective battle management to meet the pacing challenge. The PEO C3BM, established last year, is delivering and integrating cutting-edge battle management command and control capabilities and systems and driving digital infrastructure investments that ensure air and space forces can succeed in high-intensity conflict by coordinating complex missions across the joint force at scale. Operationally optimized ABMS and JADC2 is foundational to many of our operational imperatives. The fiscal year 24 President's budget requests over $500 million to enable ABMS to remain on track and to deliver initial capabilities such as the cloud-based command and control tactical C2 software to multiple of our air defense sectors, as well as our digital infrastructure efforts for software-defined wide area networking and deployable edge solutions for battle management teams at multiple echelons. In order to achieve these efforts and the many others that we'll discuss in today's hearing, it's critical that we avoid the delays that would be driven by a continuing resolution. This substantial investment in new capability much of it is critically dependent on receiving funding in fiscal year 24 and receiving it as soon as we possibly can. We estimate approximately 12 New START programs in fiscal 24 that would be unable to begin until a full year appropriation was received, absent special authority from Congress. So we cannot cede any more time during our critical moment in the Air Force's transition to the future force. I look forward to working with the subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Lieutenant General Moore.
Well, thank you, Chairman Whitman and Ranking Member Norcross, for the opportunity to testify today about the Air Force's fiscal year 2024 budget request. On behalf of the Department of the Air Force, thank you for your continued leadership and your unwavering support of the United States military and our programs. For over 70 years, the Air Force has provided air superiority to American joint forces as well as our allies and partners. They have rightly come to depend on us. Together, we survived and won the Cold War, and we fought the war on terror. But times are changing. While our attention was focused elsewhere, China was watching, learning, and provisioning for the future. Today, we're in the midst of a difficult transition from a legacy force built to support counterterrorism ops to one built to deter Chinese aggression and, if necessary, win against any peer competitor. Congress's continued support of Air Force budget requests and force structure decisions is encouraging, and we're grateful. Fiscal year 24 represents another opportunity for us to work together to remain the world's preeminent power projection force. We cannot afford to stop short of achieving the force our nation needs. Our most valuable resources, manpower, money, and time, remain extremely limited. We must be disciplined in our decisions and focus our investments on what we need most. Through the lens of the Department's 7 operational imperatives, we have aligned our funding requests to design a force that will give our adversaries pause. In our FY24 request, the Air Force remains focused on achieving a fighter force mix that provides a capable, sustainable, survivable, affordable, and properly sized force that can operate across a range of mission sets. We seek to maximize procurement of the F-35 and F-15EX, invest in the next generation air dominance family of systems, and we prioritize the munitions portfolio with multi-year procurements of advanced weapons tailored to our pacing threat. Visibility and persistence play a key role in shaping information warfare objectives to influence adversary actions and perceptions. Winning in a future high-end conflict requires accelerating investments and transitioning from aging intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms to a connected, persistent, and survivable force. In this FYDP, we look forward to fielding the E-7 as a new air-moving target into capability, as well as bringing on other platforms in this portfolio. The FY24 budget request is a shining example of the significant progress we're making towards closing key capability gaps, but the hard choices are not behind us. We must remain united as a department and as a nation to successfully overcome barriers to change. Time is our most valuable asset on the path to modernization, but it is no longer on our side. Our adversaries are watching, and we must act now to make the difficult choices it takes to modernize. American lives and those of our allies and partners rely on our ability to deliver air superiority. We cannot fail in this endeavor. We look forward to once again working with Congress to shape a lethal force that efficiently and affordably provides the most capable air power for our nation. I'm honored to sit here today with Honorable Hunter and my joint teammates, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Lieutenant General Moore. We'll now go to Assistant Secretary Stephanie.
Chairman Whitman, Ranking Member Norcross, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the Department of Navy's tactical aviation programs. Sustaining our naval tactical air superiority is critical to engaging in competition now and winning the high-end fight if necessary. We thank Congress and this committee in particular for your continuing support of these programs. The Department of the Navy is committed to investing in aviation and strike weapon programs we need to support our national security priorities. The FY24 budget calls for procurement of 88 new aircraft, which include 35 F-35s for the Navy and the Marine Corps, 26 METS training aircraft, 15 CH-53 heavy lift helicopters, 2 KC-130Js, and 10 unmanned aircraft. We continue to focus on the flying hour program and our aircraft depot maintenance to ensure our naval aviation enterprise can operate and repair the Navy's fleet of today while training the pilots we need. Our strategic FY22 budget completes the shift to fifth-generation fighter procurement with the acquisition of 175 F-35s across the FYDP, and also shows a ramp-up in our R&D for the development of our next-generation fighter family of systems. As the Service Acquisition Executive for the Joint Strike Fighter, I'm working closely with all three U.S. services, Office of Secretary of Defense, the Joint Program Office, and our industry partners to continue reducing program costs and ensuring implementation of a sustainment strategy that meets the need of the fleet and the entire F-35 enterprise. Of note, late last year, we completed negotiations and awarded the contract for construction of almost 400 aircraft across slots 15 to 17. And we have begun discussions with industry on the next production contract. This budget request also takes full advantage of the new authorities granted by Congress in last year's National Defense Authorization Act on streamlining multi-year procurement process for critical munitions. Not only will this authority allow the department to replenish our munitions stockpiles, which have been used in support of the war in Ukraine, it will support efforts to strengthen our industrial base capacity to develop, procure, and field munitions at scale. We have started discussions with both the Air Force and the Army on how best to implement these new multi-year authorities across multiple product lines at the same facilities. Overall, this budget represents a deliberate, informed development of a modernized, integrated, all-domain naval force for the future fight. It requires us to think differently, move faster, and prioritize every dollar to meet an uncertain and complex security environment. Thank you once again for the opportunity to appear before your subcommittee, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Stephanie. We'll now go to Rear Admiral OSL.
Thank you, Chairman Whitman, Ranking Member Norcross, and the distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today. I look forward to discussing the Department of the Navy's aviation programs, providing background and rationale for the Department's fiscal year 24 budget request, strategic priorities, and budgetary goals. The United States Navy and Marine Corps are persistent global maritime presence who sustain U.S. power projection across the globe from the 11 most survivable airfields in the world, the American nuclear aircraft carrier. TAC air assets delivered from our carrier air wings are vital to controlling the seas, projecting national power, and providing long-range fires necessary to win the high-end fight. The Navy closely integrates global force management plans and operations within the combatant commander requirements to maximize CVW deployments through our deployable aircraft carriers on the Master Aviation Plan. This requires close management of our fourth-generation FA-18 aircraft inventory through service life modification and fifth-generation requirements through procurement of F-35C aircraft. As we modernize carrier air wings to pace the threat, we must continue analyzing strike fighter shortfall through both an evaluation of the quantity of aircraft available and the capabilities of both the aircraft and their weapons that are necessary to defeat our adversaries. We continue to be successful with our industry partners in executing the service life modification on our fourth-generation fleet at significantly lower cost than that of a newly procured FA-18 Super Hornet, while still delivering similar Block 3 capabilities. While higher Department of Navy budgetary priorities meant deferred procurement of F-35s, the Navy is committed to the F-35C carrier transition plan and the TR-3 Block 4 upgrades for all aircraft in the Navy's inventory, which will reduce long-term sustainment costs associated with managing both Tech Refresh 2 and Tech Refresh 3 configurations simultaneously. After successful deployments with VFA 147 and VMFA 314, the Navy continues to learn and better qualify costs, mission-capable rates, and operations of the F-35C. And we look forward to gaining more deployment data from VFA 97 aboard the USS Carl Vinson later this year. As we keep our air wings ready for the fight today, we are laying the foundation to implement the Air Wing of the Future. Air Wing of the Future refers to the composition of the carrier air wing as it on-ramps advanced capabilities and capacity measured at key milestones in the near, mid, and long term. The carrier air wing will adapt and transform from a predominantly manned to a teamed manned-unmanned force structure over the next 2 decades. The Next Generation Air Dominance family of systems is the mechanism by which the Air Wing of the Future projects power. It is comprised of both manned and unmanned tactical platforms with advanced weapons, sensors, and networks to attain and maintain air superiority. The FA-XX is the manned quarterback strike fighter component of this family of systems, orchestrating manned-unmanned teaming at the leading edge of the battle space. Included in the unmanned tactical platforms for the NGAD family of systems are loyal wingman unmanned aircraft referred to as collaborative combat aircraft. These CCAs will augment current and next-generation crewed platforms with lower-cost, complementary capabilities to increase combat effectiveness in highly contested environments. Collectively, the carrier air wing will maintain strike fighter capability and capacity to pace the most stressing threat through the 30s and beyond. As we implement the Air Wing of the Future, we are concurrently developing alternative methods of achieving high-end training at lower cost. The introduction of tactical surrogates will enable pilots to maintain critical stick and rudder skills at a fraction of the cost per flight hour of our high-end tactical strike fighters. Live, virtual, and constructive training will enable aircrew to conduct end-to-end kill chain training in a simulated environment, mitigating the requirement to continually expand our live training ranges. As the Naval Aviation Enterprise manages fiscal constraints, we thank Congress and this subcommittee for your continued support of important aviation priorities, including the Flight Hour Program, critical aircraft upgrades, and investment in future capabilities. I look forward to your questions.
Rear Admiral Loisel, thanks again. We'll now go to Lieutenant General Mike Cederholm.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Whitman, Ranking Member Norcross, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, it's my humble privilege to appear before you in these hallowed halls today. Marine aviation continues to be organized, trained, equipped, and ready to fight and win anywhere on the globe. And while our heritage is ironclad, we should expect no credit tomorrow for the accomplishments or the posture of today. The Marine Corps' F-35 program of record remains 420 aircraft, procured through 2032. Marine aviation remains fully committed to the F-35 and is continuing with the transition to an all F-35 fifth-generation TAC Air Force, a linchpin in force design, and we've heard the Commandant say force design is here today. Our F-35 squadron construct provides the most lethal and sustainable fifth-generation capability forward deployed and globally engaged to support any tasking. The Marine Corps has provided an immediate 66% increase in TAC Air assets aboard L-class amphib ships in the Marine Expeditionary Unit available to the combatant commander, time now through 2067. We're working closely with the Joint Program Office and other services to ensure vital weapons capabilities are delivered to the fleet on an acceptable timeline and at cost. As the F-35 continues to see upgrades in its mission systems, capabilities, the requirement for increased cooling capacity continues to grow to ensure lethality for the remainder of its expected service life. The Marine Corps prioritizes the engine core upgrade and power and thermal management system upgrade to meet our defined requirements. Continued congressional support of the Marine Corps Block 4 modification budget is vital to our success. Looking to the future, the Marine Corps is teaming with the Navy in the development of the Marine Air Ground Task Force Unmanned Expeditionary Family of Systems. These efforts include acceleration of prototyping and experimentation of TAC-Air collaborative combat aircraft and building a common interoperable system control architecture for control of joint and all assets. And while we have an obligation to prepare for the future, we also have a mission to be prepared to fight and win right now. Congress funding of the aviation readiness accounts over the past 7 years has led to improving readiness of our aircraft every year since 2017. I would ask for your continued support and funding of the USMC sustainment accounts. In closing, I would like to thank Congress and this subcommittee in particular for your continued support of Marine Corps aviation. We're ready to fight and win today and well into the future. Thank you once again, and I look forward to your questions.
Lieutenant General Cedarholm, thank you so much. We'll now go to Lieutenant General Schmidt.
Thank you. Chairman Wood.
Lieutenant General Schmidt, if you'll turn your microphone on.
Yes, sir. Chairman Whitman, Ranking Member Norcross, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to update you on the F-35 Lightning II program. Since you last received testimony on the F-35 program in April 2022, our adversary's aggression has increased. Meanwhile, the alliances and partnerships resident within our F-35 enterprise have only grown stronger. The October 22 National Security Strategy acknowledges we are living in a decisive decade marked by geopolitical and technological uncertainty. My job is to meet the demands of this decade by putting decisive capability in the hands of our U.S. services, international partners, and a growing number of foreign military sales customers. These capabilities are directly enabled by the trust, confidence, and oversight of this subcommittee. I'm grateful for your support in the fiscal year 2023 National Defense Authorization Act, and I look forward to a continued engagement with you and your staff as you execute the fiscal year 2024 legislative cycle. The mission of the F-35 program remains the delivery of the world's most capable, affordable, and available fifth-generation air system. Over the past year, we've made progress across each of these domains and have reached several significant milestones, including delivery of 900 F-35 aircraft and 1,000 F-35 engines. Meanwhile, our nuclear certification schedule remains on track, and the enterprise has logged over 625,000 hours while operating from 27 bases and 10 warships around the world. None of this would be possible without the dedication of the men and women of the F-35 Joint Program Office, including U.S. and international government, military, and industry personnel. I've been proud to witness these contributions firsthand while meeting with pilots, maintainers, software developers, production line workers, and personnel spanning every corner of this complex global network. Over the past 8 months, I've listened to operators share spectacular stories about how the F-35 performs, senses, and communicates, and to maintainers who appreciate the ease of maintaining the aircraft when critical parts are available. In support of our operators, the Block 4 capabilities we are delivering are critical in deterring and defeating evolving threats. As we provide affordable and effective capability today, we are also executing a war on readiness to mature sustainment processes and maximize F-35 availability for decades to come. While we have accomplished much over the last year, we have much more work ahead of us. In recent years, the Tactical Air and Land Forces Subcommittee has made its expectations clear with respect to key focus areas such as Tech Refresh 3 delivery and Block 4 capability development, air system modernization, depot stand-up and supply chain maturity, sustainment cost reduction, and other critical program activities. Since becoming Program Executive Officer in July of 2022, I have carefully evaluated plans and progress across these lines of effort and look forward to providing you with a comprehensive update today. Alongside our colleagues at the Government Accountability Office, we are working aggressively to drive lasting results that will position the growing F-35 fleet for success across capability, availability, and affordability, today and for decades to come. While this is my first opportunity to brief you as the F-35 PEO, I fully own the challenges set forth above, and my team and I will deliver on our commitments. Our warfighters and the men and women they defend deserve nothing less. Thank you once again for the opportunity to share the story of the F-35 with you today.
Lieutenant General Schmidt, thank you so much. We'll now go to Mr. Ludwigson.
Chairman Whitman, Ranking Member Norcross, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss our work examining tactical aircraft in the F-35. Tactical aircraft, including the A-10, F-15, F-16, FA-18, F-22, and the multi-service F-35 variants, are critical to achieving and maintaining air dominance. About half of DoD's current tactical aircraft fleet were first produced before 2000 and are more than 25 years old. As we reported in December, DoD is making and proposing changes to its mix of tactical aircraft, but lacks key portfolio-level analysis to better inform its decisions. Congress, DoD, and the services face difficult decisions regarding investments to retain existing aircraft, divesting of some aircraft, and funding of replacement aircraft, among others. Last year, DoD proposed spending an average of $20 billion per year toward these efforts. While DoD is taking some narrower steps to improve its portfolio management practices, it has not conducted an integrated analysis that provides insights into the interdependencies and risks across all tactical air platforms and all services. We believe that conducting an integrated portfolio review would benefit DoD and the Congress as they balance these decisions. Looking at the F-35 program and including preliminary insights from a report forthcoming later this year, challenges continue to delay completion of the baseline development and challenge modernization efforts. Regarding the baseline development, the program has struggled to complete and validate the simulator needed for final testing. In addition, aircraft and engines have been delivered late and have not met reliability and maintainability metrics set for them. Regarding modernization, the Block 4 effort aimed at upgrading the F-35 to face modern threats has continued to lag schedule estimates, exceed cost estimates, and expand its scope. More recently, the program has begun moving to modernize the engine and related systems. The original specifications were not reflective of the eventual full cooling and power needs of the aircraft, which contributed to accelerated wear and tear on the existing engine. Further, the existing cooling system and engine faces limits in supporting new planned capabilities. To address these issues, the program is taking steps to develop an enhanced power and thermal management system and a new engine. Based on our preliminary analysis, these engine-related efforts lack key elements of a full business case to support decisions and are proceeding without requirements. We're also concerned that the program may seek to develop and acquire this complex, costly, and important upgrade of the PTMS engine and related systems within the F-35 program and without its own baseline cost and schedule. Chairman Whitman, Ranking Member Norcross, this concludes my statement. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Ludwigson. Appreciate your perspective there. Very, very informing. General Schmidt, let me begin with you. I want to get your thoughts and ideas on the schedule for TR-3 hardware upgrade. As we've seen, the schedule has now moved another year to the right. Can you give me an idea? Is that schedule estimate still accurate? And tell me what's occurring currently with the development, testing, and production of the TR-3 hardware, and what can we expect in that realm as it relates to delivery in 2024? Are there other things that may be unexpected that could move things even farther to the right? So give me your thoughts on where we are with the development, testing, and production.
Chairman, thank you very much for the question. So you said a lot there, so let me try to pick that apart a little bit. So relative to the complex TR-3 development effort, we are behind, as you know. We really started out in development of the hardware itself, was behind, and has now matured to the point where the hardware is proving itself reliable. All of the hardware has passed the 800-hour reliability requirements for safety of flight. All of the hardware is well past the halfway point of getting to the 8,000-hour life requirement for the hardware. The hardware itself, the initial production of the hardware to support all of the testing, all of the production lines, that yield was slow, very slow. I would tell you, I just reviewed it this morning. In the last few weeks, over the last month or so, we are much better than where we were even just recently in delivering hardware to the various test sites and the production line. Software got a late start. Software integration has been challenged, and they had a late start. We went to flight test for the first time on January 6th. We have flown 25 times as of yesterday. It is very important for us to get the next software drop, which should come in a month or so. The next software drop that unleashes most of the tactical capabilities in there so we can truly do a flight test for score across a large spectrum of the requirements. You said earlier, April 2024 was the end date. I will say we did a schedule risk assessment, 80% schedule risk assessment. Yes, that is the JPO's, the Joint Program Office's schedule risk assessment is April of 24. Lockheed's is December of 2023. To me, there's kind of a window there. Additionally, we have put measures in place to try to deliver the capabilities actually this fall to include add additional flight test aircraft. I was just out with the squadron commanders last week of both the Air Force and Navy's flight test squadrons out at Edwards, and that team is doing everything they can to deliver those capabilities as early as possible, not to mention everything our team's doing, the whole software team, and all of the industry teams that make up that hardware. But that's kind of the window, sir, the December to 23 to April 24 to get TR2 equivalent capability on TR3 jets, which is the bar that we are measuring ourselves against, sir.
That's great. It's great to hear that you've talked with the pilots that are doing the development testing and will ultimately be involved in where the production goes, and that hopefully April 2024 is the worst case scenario. So it's good to hear that things aren't moving further to the right. I want to go to Mr. Ludwig's testimony where he talked about the F-135 business case analysis, better known as the BCA, and that it wasn't performed in the traditional manner of which you see business case analysis performed. And I want to talk about the things he specifically pointed out. He said it didn't contain service-approved cooling requirements over the service life of the aircraft, didn't involve a completed technical risk assessment of developing and integrating the aircraft subsystems, as we talked about the power and thermal management systems involved in the modernization, a completed risk schedule assessment, approved acquisition strategy, and an independent cost estimate performed by an outside agency. I want to get your perspective. Do you agree or disagree with GAO's assessment in this analysis?
Sir, I'm not sure I can answer what exactly an approved, a proper business case analysis is by the GAO standards, but made a lot of good points in there. We compared these engines, the AETP engine, the current engine, modernization of the current engine, as well as identifying a significant power and thermal management system requirement, and we evaluated numerous options of power and thermal management systems to get us to various levels of cooling and power that is required. I would say that, as Mr. Ludwigson mentioned, we have been eating into the life of this engine since the beginning of the program because we did underspec the engine and its requirements. So we are building cost into this program by eating into the life of this engine with additional overhauls that are expected over the life of the program. To say I didn't have any requirements, I have a derived requirement for power and thermal management because I'm running out of power at the end of Block 4. So yes, I believe I have a derived requirement. I also believe I have a derived requirement for engines because we can't keep eating the life out of this engine and adding costs to an engine that has been under spec since the beginning. He probably makes he makes a good point on not having a requirement specifically for what is the high-end margin that we're trying to get to. Those are discussions that we're having with services. How much margin do we want to build to? And we are working through the acquisition strategy and all the technical rigor that would be required for me to sign up to an acquisition program baseline and make a full commitment to the schedule and the technical requirements of the program.
Thank you. This subcommittee is doing its due diligence to understand all the aspects of both ECU and AETP, both from Pratt & Whitney and General Electric. We want to make sure we have all the information. We're going through the Joint Program Office, BCA, to understand that. It's good to get Mr. Ludwigson's perspective on that. We'd love to get your perspective. There are other things in what would be a traditional BCAs as pointed to, things additionally that would be helpful to the committee. You know, our job is not to take a position. The JPO has made that decision. Our job as a subcommittee is to fully understand all aspects of this. And listen, I think that this issue is going to come up again with the committee in discussions. I have no reservations about that happening, but I want to make sure that everyone has the full scope of information. Having been through this debate when F-35 was first coming on board with engines, I want to make sure that we are fully informed on the entire scope of decision-making. So anything there, too, that's been pointed out by Mr. Ludwigson that would be helpful to the committee as it relates to information in the elements that he states are lacking, those things would be incredibly helpful to the committee. So Lieutenant General Smith, thank you so much for your efforts there and letting us know. And with that, I'm going to go to my good friend, Mr. Norcross.
Mr. Chairman, could I address
Yes,
the
please,
business
please,
case
yes.
just very
Honorable Hunter?
briefly?
Yes.
I wanted to say I've read the GAO testimony, and I think they make some good points about analysis that is good to do and that we will do and should do. Business case analysis is designed to inform a decision, and so depending on what decision one is making, the way that one structures the BCA can be different. I do think what the work that JPO performed did inform the decision that was in play at the time, which was an investment decision on what path forward to take between ECU and AETP. And I think the department did have the information it needed to make that decision. I think some of the other elements that were referenced are needed things, and as the general referenced, we'll work through those decisions in the acquisition strategy in implementing the program.
Sure. Well, listen, I think it'll be helpful if you let us know your thoughts and ideas about things that might be available to further develop and refine what's in the BCA. Listen, our interest is not in relitigating the decision. I can tell you it will be debated, I think, within this committee as well as on the House floor. Our job is not to relitigate that, but our job is to make sure that we fully gather every significant piece of information in both situations, ECU and AETP. Make sure that our subcommittee members as well as the full committee members have full awareness of all that information. If there are additional things in the BCA that are lacking, things that you can further refine, please make sure that you get that to us, because that will be helpful, because our members need to have every shred of that information, because I'm confident there will be continued debate about this decision going forward. So again, Honorable Hunter, thank you so much for that. And I will go again to my good friend Don Norcross.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to start out this way, but since we've heard from two of you, I think, Mr. Ludwigson, you're entitled to your position to address some of the questions that have come up and the way they look at it.
Thank you, sir. And I believe all the documents that we've referred to are important to inform the decision. When you think about the way these investment decisions are made, especially a large, important decision, normally it would follow a pattern of looking through to see if there's a material solution, then through an AOA, and then a BCA is built to construct the case of why a specific decision is being made. And what I think a traditional BCA allows you to do is to understand the risks you're taking and the consequences of the risks you're taking. Because in a perfect world, of course, you know all the information and there's no risk. In the reality that we all have to live in, there are risks. It's important to understand what those risks are. And with respect to the PTMS and the engine, you want to understand what's the status of the technologies that go into those, what's the cost estimate, and what are the contingencies within that cost estimate to get to a solution that delivers to the warfighter what you say you need when you need it. And so those assessments of cost and schedule really help you understand the extent to which an independent view of technology, how that populates into the cost and schedule estimate. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Well, needless to say, extremely complicated, and looking at some of the challenges that we're facing from near and far. This is the 5th year the panel in different configurations have come before us, specifically since I chair. And it seems like we're in the same place, identifying problems, slightly different. TR3 obviously has been one that's ongoing. Is this getting better?
Well, as I alluded to in our preliminary, based on our preliminary work, the report that should be in your hands in the next few weeks, we are concerned about the 3 things that I raised at the end, which is, and I'll go to the third one first, which is developing the path toward a PTMS and an engine within the F-35 program is is concerning if that's the path forward, because it doesn't establish that sort of baseline cost and schedule estimate that allows you build in the accountability for the services, for the contractor, to be able to know if things are going well or going poorly. I think we saw some of this with, in a similar path with respect to Block 4. And I think I worry a little bit that the engine looks a little bit like Block 4, except in this case, the program is really poised to move from a development program into sustainment, where there'll be less overt visibility to oversight committees like this one.
Well, last year, I think we did this jointly with readiness, and obviously the sustainment of this aircraft has been a major question for some time, and I know we're trying to get at that, particularly with the beating that the engine has been taking for the thermal management. I want to just shift gears here a little bit and talk to Mr. Hunter about the divestment of the Block 20, the F-22s, which you have talked about repeatedly, hoping to retire, but as you know, there's a prohibition. So when it comes to this budget, how are you handling the requests that you're asking versus the budget that is submitted?
Sir, I'll defer to General Moore on this, but in broad strokes, we are requesting, again, the authority to retire the F-22, so with a legislative proposal to enable that, and our budget assumes the success of that proposal.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hunter, and thank you, Ranking Member Norcross. We maintain our position from the FY23 budget, and that is that the F-22s, the Block 20 specifically, are not combat representative, and we again propose to divest them. We seldom link any particular offset to any particular investment, but in this case, all of the resources that came from the Block 20 went directly to NGAD. And we believe that we must get to NGAD in order to be able to continue confronting Chinese aggression into the 30s. And so that to us was a trade that was worth making. And we also note that upgrading the Block 20s to a combat configuration is cost prohibitive and very time intensive. Based on the most advanced weapons that an F-22 Block 20 can carry now, it is not competitive with the J-20 with the most advanced weapons the Chinese can put on it.
But it could be used for training?
It could be used for training, but the configuration of the cockpit is different than the configuration of a combat representative aircraft. And so as we train pilots in a Block 20 aircraft, there's negative learning that occurs. They have to unlearn some of the things that they learn in the Block 20 when they go to an operational aircraft.
So the number that has been tossed around is $470 million, correct? In the first year, excuse me, for the budget 24.
Yes, sir.
So you're assuming that it is successful. So the question comes down, if it's not successful, what do you do?
So if the divestiture is precluded but not appropriated, then we'll have to work through how the F-22 program makes it to the end of the year. If it's prohibited and appropriated, then certainly we would fly out the program for the next year based on the funding received.
So you had indicated that with these savings, it would go directly into NGAD.
They did, and that's in the budget proposal that's before the Congress. Those funds are moved from F-22 to NGAD, and that happened actually in the FY23 cycle, and we maintain that position in this budget.
So in the event that it is not approved, does that mean that money will not be available for NGAD?
I couldn't say that that's what will happen. We'll have to work with the Congress and determine how we'll make the F-22 program make it to the end of the year in the event that divestiture is prohibited, but continued operations are not appropriated.
Thank you. There's a number of the issues surrounding the engine selection, but I know Mr. Courtney wants to dig into that a little bit more. But obviously, this takes care of an issue, at least in short term in our world, of the great stress that is going on those engines, cutting down to 1,600 hours, which is significant. But we didn't spec that out in the beginning. They've had a number of programs. But then there also is a time factor when the new ECU would come into effect. So what year are you looking, assuming things move in that direction, that engine would be available?
Sir, I think General Schmidt might have a more detailed timeline. It is a development program, so there will be multiple years on the order of greater than 5 years of development work on the ECU, and then we would do production. So it is out in the future, but General Schmidt may have more detailed numbers.
Sir, we have laid out notional dates in the BCA with the professional staff members in the 2030 to 2032 range. It's very important that we do the full acquisition strategy. I want to look at all of the risks and opportunities. I will tell you one thing that I want to understand for sure, sir, is our flight test infrastructure, knowing how important it is to have a fully instrumented flight test aircraft. With our Block 4 and our aging flight test infrastructure, all of that work on old airplanes going on right now, it has been a limb fac in us getting through even some of the TR3 testing and some of the where we see TR4 going. It is just very important, sir, that I do a full technical baseline review of the engine program and lay that out in acquisition strategy for Mr. Stephanie and Dr. LaPlante to see before I commit to a date on the delivery of the ECU. But the notional dates are laid out pretty well in the BCA.
Number of other questions, but I know we have members here to ask questions, so I yield back.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate that. We're going to go now to Mr. Lalota.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service and for your input to our budgeting process. I represent the eastern part of Long Island, home to the 106th Rescue Wing of the Air National Guard. And Admiral, during your opening statement, you mentioned the Carl Vinson. 20 years ago, I deployed on her, and remembering to that Westpac back then, so I appreciate you recalling those memories. So, but my first question is for Lieutenant General Schmidt and Mr. Ludwigson regarding the F-35. I understand the Air Force's goal by 2040 is to have a tactical fighter fleet that provides the capability, capacity, and affordability to meet air superiority and global strike needs. And on the way to 2040, the Air Force plans to right-size current aircraft inventories and invest in future capabilities, such as next-generation air dominance, family of systems, which includes the F-35 modernization, of Technical Refresh 3, and Block 4 software capability. The GAO has reported on the F-35 Block 4 software quality issues, some of which are not discovered until the software is delivered to the fleet. So to General Schmidt and Mr. Ludwigson, what progress, if any, has been made to improve the quality of Block 4 software development and to ensure the government is getting a quality product?
Sir, thank you very much. So I would say generally, sir, we have knocked down the numbers of deficiencies out there in the field year after year. As we've added capabilities, the number of overall deficiencies are lower. By the way, I also was on the USS Carl Vinson just last week and had an awesome opportunity to hang out with with all the pilots and maintainers and everything that makes F-35s work on that ship. It was absolutely incredible. I would say relative to and it kind of links up with something that I think Representative Norcross said, was in the joint simulation environment, which we've had challenges with in the past, trying to get to IOT&E, full completion of IOT&E. I am very impressed with the progress of what NavAir and the contractor and AFOTEC are doing to get to a simulation environment that truly simulates every one of our capabilities to validate where the deficiencies are or are not. It is absolutely incredible the progress they've made over the last 5 months. I asked them, I said, I need to put a line in the sand in December to get to milestone C. That means we have to do runs for score. DOT&E has been very supportive of this and as part of the process. And so all I can say is, what I'm trying to say is, we are actually producing this joint simulation environment to truly understand in a completely synthetic environment with all of our threats represented, where those airplanes and the deficiencies are, and once that capability gets through IOT&E, we can upgrade the joint simulation environment to the latest software version, because we're held to the previous version to get through IOT&E. So that will be a remarkable tool for proving out all of our deficiencies or lack thereof in a simulated environment, which will be much more efficient than we do it today.
Thanks. We appreciate you keeping a watchful eye on that. Did you want to add to that, Mr. Ludwigson?
Yes, sir. I believe that in our forthcoming report should be, as I said, with the Department for Agency comment and with y'all for review during that time. We do highlight the fact that there are a number of, they brought in an independent assessment to help with the software development process. They had recommendations, many of them similar to recommendations that GAO has made over the years. I believe that they've started to implement those recommendations, including bringing in automated software testing, which can be critically important to make sure that you are testing against the regression, so the older capabilities as you add new capabilities, and that can be very helpful. I also think that the shift, they've adopted a shift to one-year releases of new capabilities. We have concerns about that being a movement against sort of the way you develop agile software as you regularly and routinely get this out to the user community. This delays it still further than where they had been previously.
Thanks for your work, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Lalotta. Now go to Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses for, again, your really solid testimony. General Schmidt, I just wanted to note on page 7 of your testimony, you pointed out this problem that took place December 2022 where there was a crash, and within 2 months, a solution had been found with a lot of people who worked really hard and who were really smart in terms of coming up with a fix for that program. It's actually quite an extraordinary effort of engineers and all the stakeholders to make sure that a solution was found. And it's good news to see in the report that, the deliveries are going to be basically caught up by May 1. I mean, it's really an amazing turnaround. So thank you again and I'll share that with the folks back in East Hartford and Middletown. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Sir, just to echo everything you just said, yes, it was a challenge that we discovered, the resonance issue between the main fuel throttle valve and the tube. But you think about the December timeframe when we saw that, and that team of engineers at Pratt & Whitney, in the JPO, in the Navy, in the Air Force, worked 7 days a week. From then to get this engineering change out to our aircraft, to our fleets, to our low-time engines, which were the ones affected by this, to allow for this safety mitigation engineering change to be implemented in a rather short period of time. Actually, a very innovative solution, by the way, this orifice that they came up with. So yes, I'm very proud of that team across the board. I couldn't be more proud.
Great, thank you. Well, it's great to see Mr. Stephanie here. Again, he just kind of, migrates from one subcommittee to another. And, but again, you're obviously wearing your hat for the Navy here today in terms of, a whole, slew of issues in terms of aircraft. And I just want to, again, focus on, the question of the engine core upgrade for F-35, which obviously the Navy is certainly an important partner in terms of the way that decision process is made. And again, your testimony pretty much echoed Mr. Hunter's testimony that basically the core upgrade will restore engine life and prevent degradation for the Navy variant as well as the other two and partner nations at the lowest cost. I mean, is that the bottom line in terms of the way the Navy views this decision in the budget?
So yes, sir. First of all, the thermal management system, I think, is the most important. That's a near-term thing that has to be done no matter what. And then I believe as the Navy and the Marine Corps together, and I don't want to necessarily speak for my two colleagues here, that ability to have a single solution across the Navy and Marine Corps aircraft inventory was critically important to us.
Great. General, maybe on behalf of the Marine Corps, I don't know if you'd want to weigh in.
Oh, thank you, sir. Yes, just one addition to that. I fully concur with everything that's been said, sir. On the Marine Corps perspective, what this engine core upgrade does is it gives us a greater bring-back capability to the boat. What does that mean? We can bring back 1,000 pounds more to the boat, which gives us life. Fuel is life. Time on station is life for us. So that's why we are excited about the ECU and the PTMS upgrade, sir.
Thank you. Again, having been around here a while, remember the last time we were debating this engine issue, and Admiral Roughhead was CNO at the time, and did sort of point out the fact that the Navy has a special sort of issue that they have to contend with, which is space on aircraft carriers, and that they just really don't have, again, the capacity to deal with, large and multiple versions of engines, and that still resonates with me. That as we move forward on this decision, that we have to be mindful that all three services have to we have to be sensitive to what their needs are. So again, I think the decision by the Air Force in terms of funding ECU is a pretty powerful statement to Congress, and I look forward to, like the chairman, continuing this discussion. But we're not a debate club. We have to make decisions, and we have to move forward at some point. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Courtney. I appreciate your perspective. We'll go now to Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm interested in the PCA and CCA programs. When do you anticipate that the PCA and CCA programs will be operational and part of our fleet?
So they are on different timelines, although they are closely, obviously, related to one another as part of a family of systems. For the NGAD program, we are working very hard to deliver in the 2030s. That is a very high-end capability, and it is geared to the environment that we anticipate will be there, the security environment that they'll have to operate in that time frame.
Is that early 30s, middle 30s, late 30s? What 30s is it's 10 years. Okay.
Early 2030s, sir.
Okay.
And for the CCA, that is a program where we are very much focused on speed to ramp. So we are looking to field that capability as rapidly as possible. It'll be integral to the way that we approach industry and ask them for proposals that they demonstrate their ability to perform as quickly as possible. And so we anticipate fielding that in the 2020s and the later 2020s.
So CCA is not tied to PCA. It's as soon as you can get it out and then somehow tied to whatever aircraft we have in the inventory at the time.
That is our approach. So it will work with multiple tactical platforms within the Air Force.
Okay. In 2019, you indicated that the Air Force would need 7 additional fighter aircraft squadrons. Is that still the case?
I think in terms of force structure, let me defer to General Moore on that.
Thanks, Mr. Hunter. Thank you, sir. Capacity is certainly an issue, but I would say since 2019, what we would now look towards for capacity is, as you just mentioned, CCAs. The premise of this program was that the kind of fighters that we're buying in order to create the amount of iron that needs to be in the air to confront an adversary like China, it's not affordable the way we've been doing it. And so the way that we can do that affordably is by buying CCAs and by creating mass with CCAs. And so the question that we will have to answer as CCAs come into the fleet is, what actually does a fighter squadron look like? Are CCAs a part of a fighter squadron, or are they a separate entity altogether? Do they deploy as one entity, or do they come together on the battlefield? And in order to do that, we put in our budget in the 24 cycle, as you'll see, an experimental operations squadron. Ordinarily, we provide a requirement to industry. They come back with what we've asked for, and we know that it does exactly what we asked. In this case, we've asked a question to industry to see what's possible rather than tell them exactly what we want. So what we receive back in terms of CCAs, we'll have to develop tactics, techniques, procedures, employment models, and all of that to make sure that we can get the most out of them possible and answer the kind of questions that I posed before. That is a funded project in our budget. It goes along with the dollars for CCA, and whether or not we need additional fighter squadrons will depend on how this all turns out. But certainly capacity is an issue, and the mass that it takes to confront an adversary like China is intense.
No, I understand that. My concern is that the development of, you have in your plan a reduction in the force of about 400 aircraft, and it's not necessarily tied to development of the CCA. I mean, if you can, I understand that once you have a CCA, that you can reevaluate and see how many aircraft you need, but before 2028, we may need all the aircraft that we have right now and more.
Yes, sir. But the ones that we'll need in 2028, they have to be capable of operating on the battlefield that we foresee. 3/4 of the aircraft that we divest in the budget year and 2/3 of the aircraft that we divest across the FYDP are A-10s and F-15Cs. The A-10s are not capable of operating in a high-end
I understand.
fight.
I understand.
F-15Cs, last year when we were here, there were 2 aircraft at Kadena that were grounded and would never fly again, and 2 more that could only fly a one-time flight to the boneyard. Now it's 3 that are grounded forever, and 4 that are only capable of a one-time flight to the boneyard. Of every 10 aircraft in the F-15C fleet that we put into depot, only 2 of them come out. Those aircraft are not going to be useful in FY28 because they're not going to still be flying. That, as I said, is 3/4 of the aircraft we divest in the budget year.
Fair enough. The other concern that I have is the retirement of the F-22s. You have
Yes, sir.
32 F-22s that you want to retire. They're, as far as I know, still the preeminent fighter that we have, and we only have 185 of them. That causes me some concern that we're going to retire 32 of them, okay?
Yes, sir. Those particular F-22s are not the highest end fighters we have. They don't have the most advanced communications. They don't have the most advanced electronic warfare. They don't carry our most advanced weapons. They're not the same as the other parts of the F-22 fleet, the Block 30 and 35, and they are extremely unlikely to ever become so. It's cost prohibitive and would take over a decade to make that transition.
Fair enough. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Jimenez. We'll now go to Mr. Horsford.
Thank you, Chairman Whitman and Ranking Member Norcross. Last June, the Air Force's 65th Air Aggressor Squadron with F-35 firefighters formally stood up at Nellis Air Force Base in my district. The 65th Aggressor Squadron provides U.S. Air Force with 5th-generation Red Air to replicate the advanced threats posed by other 5th-generation fighters from China and Russia, helps train students at the Air Force Weapons School, and assist in red flag exercises to help train pilots from other services and our allies. Also in my district is the Nevada Test and Training Range, which supports the current and future testing and training, and it is the only location that can train 5th-generation systems in a live environment. Lieutenant General Moore and Lieutenant General Schmidt and Mr. Hunter, how many tactical aircraft and with what capabilities does the service need to achieve its mission? And on what analysis is this based?
Sir, Lieutenant General Moore, I would go back to the discussion about how we intend to fight and about how CCAs are integrated into the force. So I think as we determine what the attributes of CCAs will be, what is possible for industry to deliver, we'll be able to get to a closer answer to that. I think right now we foresee between 1,000 and 1,100 mission aircraft in the fighter world, but that will surely change because of CCAs. I don't know that that CCAs will compete against manned fighters. That certainly is not our intent. But we'll have to see what it takes as we go forward. The threat also drives this, and the threat is changing dramatically and quickly. And so this is not a static number. It's a number that we will continue to monitor going forward.
And if I could just add to that, sir, one of the key insights from our operational imperatives work was the way in which our different platforms work together. And it's essential that they be able to work together in order to actually perform the missions that the operational imperatives were examining, in order to make sure that we can, prosecute a mission from start to finish. And it involves critical space assets to make that happen, and involves the aerial networks that connect our tactical and our ISR and our command and control platforms together. And so it's really the linkage that is critical to success. And so the numbers are obviously incredibly important. Without aircraft, you can't do it. But what we discovered was most essential in many cases was the linkages between systems.
And can you explain to the committee the capabilities gap of a 4th and 5th generation fighter, please?
I mean, for the most part, having a 5th generation platform is sort of the price of entry into a highly contested environment. Without having the characteristics that we see on our 5th generation platforms, you simply won't be invited to the game. Now, having said that, there are 4th generation platforms do provide important roles from standoff and in other ways. They are an important part of our force, and that's why we're maintaining that throughout the next 2 decades. But for the most highly contested environment, the 5th generation platforms, that their characteristics, their survivability, and the mission systems that they provide and the fused avionics is really the price of entry to the fight.
Lieutenant General Moore, Secretary Kendall recently announced a commitment to acquire unmanned collaborative combat aircraft in large numbers. So can you comment on the missions the CCAs will be performing?
Yes, sir. So we see three kind of basic mission sets for collaborative combat aircraft. The first is the ability to augment the combat force as shooters. The second is the ability to conduct electronic warfare. And the third is the ability to be sensors in the battle space. We'll concentrate first on the ability for CCAs to augment shooters and to be shooters themselves. And then we will look to the ability to use them for electronic warfare as well as sensors on the battlefield. First and foremost, though, we'll look to use them to be shooters and to augment the combat force.
Great. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for your testifying today, and thank you to my colleagues. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Horsford. We'll now go to Mr. Bacon.
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate all of you being here. I want to piggyback on some of the questions from my friend from Florida here. And so my questions related to General Moore and maybe Mr. Hunter, if you want to add to it. So what I understand is we're going to be procuring 288 aircraft over the FYDP, but we're divesting 685. So that's a 400 aircraft delta, roughly, that we're going to be decreasing. And you're saying those are mainly A-10s and F-15Cs?
409 of the aircraft we're divesting across the FYDP are A-10s and F-15Cs.
Okay, so there's another 200 and so. What are they, F-16s, or what are they?
So there are some pre-block F-16s in our proposal for the F-22 Block 20.
Okay. The concern that we have, sorry, maybe this isn't quite close enough here, is that at some point we're so low on our fighter inventory that, and I get it, most of these aircraft, we don't want them for China, but there could be other contingencies out there. So I'm hearing for some of our recently retired four-stars that they're fear that we're going below the floor we need. Is there concern that we're going too low? Because this is the lowest we've ever been, really going back since the 50s or post-World War II, and we're dropping down another 400. Is there a point where we're taking too much risk?
So there's no zero risk scenario, but we are very concerned about the balance between near-term risk that impacts the combatant commander's ability to fight tonight, as well as our need to modernize. I'm proud to say that we have said for several budget cycles that we needed to procure 72 new fighters a year, and this budget does that.
Right.
We're grateful for the department for the resources that it takes to make that proposal, and we'll continue as we go forward to do what we can within our established budget top lines to maximize the procurement that'll get us the capacity that you describe.
Yeah, and if I could just weigh in, and there is a balance of risk here. And so, as the general said, there is risk on both sides, and there is no risk posture. I am more concerned about the risk that we face against the pacing challenge than I am about the concern that the risk that we have in performing some of those other missions that we referenced.
Was there any way to increase the F-35 production from 48? If we're going to drop 400 aircraft in net, is there a way that we could expand that F-35 production? 48 seems like a low bar, but maybe I'm wrong. And I open that up to maybe our F-35 leader here, but what do you think? Is there a way we could expand to that production higher?
We have been working for several years to get to 48,
48.
which we've achieved, so give us one moment to celebrate that. But I would also point in addition, 24 F-15EXs, so I think that's a key part of the picture as well.
Okay.
But I'll let the general speak to production capacity.
Sir, if that's a production capacity question, we have contracted for 156 aircraft a year in in Lot 17, which is FY23, delivering in 25. So they've hit close to that. That's the first time we've gone up to 156. I think they will hit 156. I do want to make sure that the supply chain that supports both a spectacular production line as well as the sustainment side of maintaining all of those airplanes around the world, that when I want to make sure a supply chain that supports production at a higher rate than 156, that we also have the supply posture to support everything else we need around the world. But yes, I think we could go higher than 156. I would want to make sure we're making the investment for the right reasons, because to stay at a level versus paying to get there and then falling back down. Our partners and FMS customers, our FMS partners FMS customers and international partners are obviously a huge part of this program and continue to demand in
I
a
get
great
it.
way
We got to
more.
divide it up with our friends. Understand? Maybe this is why I understand the F-35s were on the unfunded list and then taken off. Is that why it was taken off? Because we were at capacity?
Sir, there were never F-35s on the unfunded list this
Okay.
year. The department worked very carefully to make sure that the number of aircraft we said we needed were in the base budget, and there were never F-35s on the unfunded priorities list this year.
I'd like to ask maybe one question for the record, since I'm out of time. I heard there were some issues with the joint simulation environment and how that could potentially affect the full rate production of the F-35s. Is there a way we could get an update? And I'll just have to take it for the record.
Yes, sir. I asked to set a line in the sand for December of this year, 2023, and working with DOT&E, Afotech, Navair, who's developing the joint simulation environment, our team, and Lockheed, whether we could get there from here. I am very proud of the collaboration that has happened over the last 5 months. We have a plan to run IoT&E for SCORE in about the August timeframe, which would support some kind of a report, I think, from the DOT&E by December to support that milestone C full rate production decision at the end of the year. That is the plan that I am working towards, and a lot of people are trying to help.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Bacon. We'll now go to Mr. Norcross.
Just a real quick clarification. When we start to up the numbers of the actual planes rolling off the line, one of the issues we had is to make sure the engines, which come from obviously elsewhere, Pratt & Whitney, were there. They were running at such high production that the parts for the engine were not going to be available for the depot and repair. Where are we on that issue? Because that directly impacts the question that was just asked.
That's a great question, sir, and it is a supply chain. I just met with Pratt & Whitney on that subject Tuesday. They are doing a lot of work to continue to fill their supply chain, both that supports the production engines as well as all of the supports sustainment of our fleets around the world. It is still a concern. I think in the supply chain side, at the same time, we could talk about maybe the power module challenges we had last year, which that is not one of my top drivers, and I'm very proud of our team at Tinker, of Pratt & Whitney, and all of the folks that work together to take power modules from having 48 holes a little over a year ago to 1 hole last month for power modules. But those kinds of things eat into parts and all of that stuff. So it's a great question, sir. It's certainly on my radar all the time relative to making sure we have parts supporting our engine supply chain moving forward.
Because I think we all understand the need for more aircraft, but robbing Peter to pay Paul, because there are partners, ourselves around the world that need these parts. And if they're going into new ones, somebody else is coming up short. Really difficult, but I'm glad you're getting at it, and I yield back.
I would just say one thing to that, sir, is that while we have had a number of late engines as identified by the GAO, many of them late, those were not necessarily due to part shortages, at least on the production line. They have had some quality things that have been corrected over time, but they have delivered engines in general within the given time frame needed, but some of them late, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Norcross. Now go to Mr. McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'm very glad you clarified how we're going to be decommissioning F-22s. I was a little concerned when we started talking about that, because I was very proud to have them make their first kill this year, and just want to make sure that we sustain that brilliant program. With that said, Lieutenant General Smith, I'm tracking that Moody Air Force Base is planning to divest into the A-10s, which makes me kind of sad as a former Ford Air Controller. The F-35s are going to replace, are they going to have a similar mission or something entirely different as far as what they're going to be applied for?
Let me start, and I'll let General Moore speak to it as well. But the F-35 is very much a multi-mission aircraft, so they will be fully capable of performing the close air support mission as our other Air Force assets. I noted General Brown spoke to this with direct experience from his time in 3 different Air Force platforms, none of which was the A-10 or the F-35, doing close air support. But that'll definitely be a part of the F-35's mission. But it's also core to our several missions that we see in Indo-PACOM, which may or may not involve close air support, like defensive counter-air, offensive counter-air. There's a whole range of missions the F-35 will be equipped to perform for the Air Force.
So basically, we're just picking up a greater flexibility and a greater mission account.
Correct.
Okay, great. I'll save the remainder of my time for Lieutenant General Cedarholm, who took the liberty of explaining something to me about the F-35 program. There's a lot of Marines, Marines that have retired, who had big concerns about how we reorganized our F-35s. And I just wanted to have you break down the squadron organization, how we've gone from 16 to 10, and how that affects our mission going forward, and how that's going to give us greater flexibility into the future. And by the way, just for the record, I brought my writing material just to take good notes from our Marines out there.
Sir, thank you very much, and I totally dig the crayons. I hope I don't start eating them here in a second. Sir, on paper, I understand the concern that some former Marines may have, but and taken alone, I understand the genesis of that. But when you put it into context, as we discussed earlier, sir, I posit that the resultant factor changes when you put it into transition, when you put the transition into motion. What do I mean by that? Since 2007, our program of record has been 420. And it's always centered around 18 squadrons for the last decade. 18 squadrons are going to comprise our F-35 transition for the last decade. That gives us the capability, the capacity, and the sustainability, long-term sustainability, to fly off of L-class ship amphibs, to fly off of carriers, to fly off of land-based, and to fly off of austere expeditionary air bases. The Commandant's decision to move to 18 squadrons, still the central part of our construct, but 10 aircraft in those squadrons, is the swiftest, most lethal, and long-term sustainable construct of the 3 constructs we've had over the last 15 years as we've ramped up this transition of the program. Just to give you one short example, sir, cognizant of your time, this transition to 10 squadrons, we have found we have the ability now to deploy 10 F-35Bs, a full squadron on board the Muse, which, as you know, are globally deployed and engaged, forward deployed. That is a 66% increase in TAC air firepower, 5th-gen TAC air firepower, out on the point that was not available under any of the other constructs. So I'm excited. The Marine Corps remains committed to 420, and I'm excited at what this airplane will bring for the MAGTF, the Joint Force Maritime Component Commander, and the Joint Force, sir.
Fantastic explanation. I appreciate that. And just with that, I'll yield with making sure we represent the rotary wings.
Love the 53, sir.
Hoorah.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. We'll now go to Mr. Fallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Doctor, I thank you for bringing the crayons. I might use them later. But, when we talk about fixed-wing aircrafts, it seems like there's something, doesn't matter what the service is, there's something that we have in common. It's delays, right? I mean, there's, you're talking about upgrades are delayed, engines are delayed, new airframes, retirements, that kind of thing. So, and delays usually mean extra costs. So what I wanted to ask was, and there seems to be a lot of hand-wringing as well, and hey, we'll do better in the future. But how can we, moving forward, prevent these really persistent delays? I just open it up to the esteemed panel if anybody wants to tackle that one.
Well, do you want your question? Would you rather focus on F-35 or is your question broader
just
too?
in general, like the next weapon system that we have, what can we do? And yeah, I would love to touch on the F-35.
Yeah, well, let me just, if I could talk a little bit, since I talked about speed to ramp on collaborative combat aircraft, about that approach, because we have a very, it's a very demanding schedule that we're forecasting for that program, and so it will be a challenge. The way that we address that challenge, partly it's the resourcing, which starts quickly in this budget request. This is a substantial request for the Congress. Partly it's about having very, very, very disciplined in specifying requirements and not reaching for more than is achievable in the time frame that we're trying to achieve. And that is the core when we go out to industry and ask them for proposals. The core will be making sure that what we are asking for is achievable in the time frame in which we're asking it. And so I think that's that balance that we strike across many platforms. And so if you look at Block 4, that is a very sophisticated and advanced capability. We asked for it because it is essential to the fight that we see coming. And so we need that capability. We asked for it on a fairly rapid time frame, and I think that's where we got a little disconnected, and you see where we are today, in that we wanted a very advanced capability and we wanted it very quickly. I think when all is said and done, I'm still reasonably optimistic that, when all the dust settles and we all look back and say, given what we asked industry to do with the Block 4 capability, I think there's a chance we could still look back and say we actually accomplished that fairly quickly, but it wasn't as quickly as we initially projected and asked them to do.
General Schmidt, how many F-35s can we build in a year?
In a year, sir, 156 is our rate for.
Over a 12-month period?
Yeah, we will deliver that in 25. So we're a little less than that right now, but that's our lot 70. Our FY23 is what we went on contract for, 156 per year. That's all together, U.S. and international.
And it's not 90 million, roughly?
For an F-35A is about 82.5 million, and yes, sir. So, and higher for B's and C's.
I'm just worried about when you look forward, if God forbid we had to get into some kind of a conflict in Asia with China over Taiwan, something like that. What we're seeing in Ukraine about just attrition and making sure that, these are obviously very expensive, but that we would have the capability to replace our losses. Do you feel confident that as far as the F-35 goes that we could? You're talking assuming a pretty significant conflict with a major power like China.
So I think you're maybe asking a broader question, sir, which is, should we invest in additional capacity to deal with, is that what you're asking, sir? I think
yeah,
we can, that is a decision, we can all make or discuss is the value of investing in additional capacity to deal with real-world things.
You think the F-35 is...
Sir, if I could jump in maybe to help the general. The limiter right now is a single company that makes the fuselage, Northrop Grumman. So we can bring us, and we're looking to bring a second company in to help that line and move that limit to a higher, right? We're limited by just having a single fuselage maker.
And is the greatest threat to an F-35 another aircraft that's maybe a fifth gen, or is it SAMs and the A2ADs?
Yeah, sir, I would say it's all of the above, and it really depends on what mission the F-35 is engaged in. And a ground strike mission, it's going to be the SAMs, and A2AD, and an air-to-air mission, it's going to be those enemy aircraft.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, thank you. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. I will go to our members and see if anybody else has any additional questions. Mr. Jimenez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're talking about, I want to follow up on my colleague, Mr. Bacon, and the production, and I'm really concerned about retiring 400 aircraft and not having the replacement for those 400 aircraft, because we don't know when the next fight is. And my concern is that we have too few and not enough replacement. So we're going back to this F-35 and the production. You were asking for, I believe, what, 72 additional aircraft? How many were F-35s?
48 F-35s and 24 F-15EXs.
Yet we can produce 100 and something, 150 aircraft a year. So is that based on budget, or is that based on what you want or what you need? Because I want to know, I want to base our production on what you need. And I'm not sure that what you're asking for is what you need. I think that what you're asking for is what you think you can afford.
So I think it's a combination. There certainly is an affordability component, not just in procuring the airplanes, but also in maintaining and operating them. There's a manpower component in how rapidly we can bring on pilots and maintainers. And there's also a production line capacity. So all of those things come together, and that's how 48 comes to be. So in a world with unlimited resources, there could certainly be a different number. But in the world that we operate in, where both manpower, production line capacity, as well as budget top line all come into play, 48 is where we landed in this budget, and 72 has been the number we've used for the last several cycles to say that that's the minimum that we need to both bring down the fleet age and increase our capability.
Again, you kind of went around, but I think that the answer is a lot of it has to do with what the budget, your budget constraints are. And I was asked a question about what we need to spend on defense. And my answer was, whatever we need to spend on defense is what we need to spend on defense. And again, that 400 number of fewer aircraft really concerns me until we get the CCAs. And actually, what I'd like to see is just the CCAs be an additional capability and not just supplanting, the other combat aircraft. So if it's budget, then, Mr. Chairman, I think we need to deal with that.
Very good.
Yes, sir. And we do not intend for CCAs to reduce the number of manned fighters in the inventory. They are intended to do exactly as you mentioned, to augment, to create mass in an affordable way.
Very good. Thanks, Mr. Mendez. Dr. McCormick, any additional questions? All right, very good. Listen, I appreciate the box of crayons up there. Could you hand me one? That's right. They're all there, though, right? They're all there. I love it. I love it. Don, any additional questions?
Nope, just want to thank the witnesses. Obviously, a very large topic.
Yeah.
And thanks for coming here and sharing your testimony. And to those who are behind you, figuratively, thank them also.
Very good. I do have one concluding question for Secretary Hunter. I want to look a little bit more at the T7 program. Was supposed to be the Air Force's marquee digital engineering and production program. However, we see the award of the production contract has actually slipped by 3 years. We're at a point right now where the prime contractor, Boeing, is going to get underway without there being a formal contract. I just want to know, how does the Air Force and the Defense Contract Management Agency plan to do proper oversight and look at the assembly and production of the aircraft without having a formal contract awarded? And do you have any concerns about the prime contractor beginning production without a contract?
So, as you indicated, Boeing has notified the Air Force they intend to begin production of the initial T-7s at risk, so that's at their risk. Mm-hmm. We have been working with DCMA to come up with a solution where they can do observation of the production process so that when we get to the point of accepting aircraft, we will know that it, in fact, meets our requirements. And again, the at-risk part means if, when we get there, it doesn't meet our requirement, Boeing will then have to pay for any corrections to any deficiencies that are identified. But actually, I think your staff highlighted this issue about DCMA and its ability to work on the program when Boeing is at risk to us, and we believe we've identified a path forward, which we are in the process of implementing to get them engaged in that.
Okay. Very good. It'd be great for us to have up-to-date information as you pursue that. Listen, it's great that Boeing is willing to jump out there and take the risk on T7, but we also don't want to get too far in the risk category and then have things grind to a halt because things have gone far awry, or there's lack of communication between the Air Force and Boeing on what's necessary. So it can end up okay, but I want to make sure that we understand, where things could also go awry. And GAO obviously highlighted that to us and wanted us to make sure that we were aware of that. And obviously, there's risk on both sides. It's great that Boeing's willing to take risk, but there's significant risk, too, on the Air Force's side. So we definitely want to make sure that we're kept informed as that continues to go forward.
Yes, and I should note that we did have a substantial achievement in February of getting through performing a slud test, dealing with some of the issues with the escape system that we were hung up on, that will allow us to get to military flight release and begin the developmental tests. So we are now moving forward from areas where the program had gotten stalled.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Secretary Hunter. I want to thank again our witnesses. Thank you so much for joining us today. Incredibly helpful. Lots of things going on with tactical aircraft. That's both a challenge, but a good thing, too, that we're moving forward in a lot of these different areas. Please keep us informed on the progress that's being made. There'll be, I'm sure, much additional discussion by the full committee as we go forward with T-135, F-35, retirements, the whole realm of what happens in the tactical aircraft realm. So I appreciate what you all do. We look forward to continued conversations. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.